I would like them to take back the Concordat made with Adolf Hitler, the first treaty he ever signed, giving the Church a monopoly over education in Germany in exchange for the dissolution of the Catholic Centre Party, to give the Nazi Party a clear run. I'd have apologized for the Lateran Pact with Mussolini, myself, also the first treaty ever signed by that fascist dictator. I would also think I'd want to reconsider the fact that Father Tiso, head of the Nazi puppet state in Slovakia, was a priest in holy orders, that the Croatian fascist puppet state, the Ustaša state of Ante Pavelić, was also operating under full clerical protection and disguise, as was the regime of General Franco and the dictator Antonio. I don't think the German Church should have asked Hitler's birthday to be celebrated from the pulpit every year until he died. Joseph Ratzinger, the current Pope, considered by some, by Catholics, to be the Vicar of Christ on earth, says of the Indians who were massacred in the course of conversion in Brazil, after the apology had been made to them, he said, nonetheless, it must be remembered that before we came to convert them, they were silently awaiting the arrival of the Church. In his comment, one of the few he's made, on the institutionalization of rape and torture and maltreatment of children in Catholic institutions, he has said, it's a very severe crisis which involves us, he said, in the following: in the need for applying to these victims the most loving pastoral care. Well, I'm sorry. They've already had that. And to say that this is the responsibility laid upon you by the horrific admission that you've already had to make is not accepting responsibility in any adult sense. Where is Cardinal Bernard Law now? Where is he? Where is the Cardinal Archbishop of Boston, whose resignation was indignantly demanded, finally, by 50 members of the Church and by the whole laity of Massachusetts, who also demanded his prosecution for the promotion and protection and covering up and apology for and defense of people whose crimes against children are too revolting to specify. He's the Supreme Vicar of the Church of Santa Maria Maggiore in Rome, personally appointed by the Pope to that as well as many other important sinecures. And in 2005, this man, a fugitive from justice and from complicity in the filthiest crime that it's possible for a human being to imagine, was one of those voting in conclave to decide who the next Vicar of Christ on earth will be. But the rape and torture of children is not something to be relativized. It's not something to be excused as a few bad priests. It's certainly not to be excused by the hideously false claim made by some Catholic conservatives that this wouldn't have happened if queers hadn't been allowed into the Church. I'm sorry to say that queerdom in the Church is an old story too. And it's the crime that cries out for punishment. It's the thing that if we were accused of on this side of the House, we would die rather than admit. And if we were guilty of it, would kill ourselves. Because, and I'll quote again from the encyclicals, it is said of the Crusades, of the complicity with the Holocaust, of the political and diplomatic alliance with fascism, of all of these things, it is said, well, violence was committed, but I'll stress this, I'll underline it, I'll quote directly, in the service of the truth. The readmission as a bishop of Roger Williamson, a member of Marcel Lefebvre's fanatical, hysterical breakaway sect, so-called Society of St. Pius X. Roger Williamson, found hiding in a reactionary, quasi-fascistic establishment in Argentina, has long been a believer that, I'll put this shortly, that the Holocaust did not occur, but the Jews did kill Christ. In other words, genocide no, deicide yes. He was quite rightly excommunicated some years ago, along with several other members of his ratbag organization. But Joseph Ratzinger's invited him back into the communion because to him, having this man, this liar, this fraud, this racist, in the Church is more important because it's church unity than the things that he said and done and continues to stand for. Staying in Africa, I think it will one day be admitted with shame that it might have been in error to say that AIDS is bad as a disease, very bad, but not quite as bad as condoms are bad, or not as immoral in the same way. The preachings of his church are responsible for the death and suffering and misery of millions of his brother and sister Africans, and he should apologize for it. He should show some shame. Fourth, for condemning my friend Stephen Fry for his nature, for saying you couldn't be a member of our church. You're born in sin. He's not being condemned for what he does, he's being condemned for what he is. You're a child made in the image of God. Oh, no, you're not. You're a faggot. And you can't join your church and you can't go to heaven. This is disgraceful. It's inhuman. It's obscene. And it comes from a clutch of hysterical, sinister virgins who've already betrayed their charge in the children of their own church.
Just imagine in this square mile how many people were burned for reading the Bible in English. And one of the principal burners and torturers of those who tried to read the Bible in English here in London was Thomas More. Now, that's a long time ago. It's not relevant, except that it was only last century that Thomas More was made a saint, and it was only in the year 2000 that the last pope, the Pole, he made Thomas More the patron saint of politicians. This is a man who put people on the rack for daring to own a Bible in English. You are a nation-state, and it is no accident that the UN Cairo Population Conference, when they were trying to do something about the world's population spinning out of control, Vatican City, as a nation-state represented at that conference, made a joint statement with the Islamic countries of the world, notably the most extreme Islamic countries of the world, led by Saudi Arabia, and it began on behalf of the revealed religions of the world, ... And what it did was essentially hobble and veto any possibility of women's sexual freedom in the world, because as we know, the Islamic religion and the Catholic Church have never been anything other than implacably opposed to women's choice in their own bodies and their destinies. So, Ratzinger, in 2003, he was prefect, I'm not making this up, he was prefect of the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith. And it was his job to deal with the child abuse scandal that was brewing. His first act was to write a letter to Catholic bishops ordering them, on pain of excommunication, not to talk to the police or anyone else. Investigations should be handled, he wrote, and I'm quoting that letter, in the most secretive way, restrained by perpetual silence. The Mexican founder of the Legion of Christ movement, Maciel Degollado, was protected from his own catalogue of child abuse, which is horrific. One cannot put on trial so close a friend of the Pope, said Ratzinger. When the allegations could no longer be denied, Maciel was sentenced to a life of prayer and penitence. And Ratzinger described the whole affair, and that of Bernard Law of Boston, to which my colleague also referred, as causing suffering for the Church and for me personally. He also said the answer would be to stop homosexuals from being allowed into the Church. For me to be called a pervert by these extraordinarily sexually dysfunctional people, I don't think human history has ever had more. I'm not denying that abstinence is a very good way of not getting AIDS. It really is. It works. So does being faithful. But so do condoms. And do not deny it. And this Pope, not satisfied with saying, condoms are against our religion, please consider first abstinence, second being faithful to your partner. He spreads the lie that condoms actually increase the incidence of AIDS. He actually makes sure that aid is conditional on saying no to condoms. I have been to, there's a hospital in Bwindi in the west of Uganda where I do quite a lot of work. It is unbelievable, the pain and suffering you see. Now, yes, it is true, abstinence will stop it. It's the strange thing about this church. It is obsessed with sex. Absolutely obsessed. Now, they will say, we with our permissive society and our rude jokes are obsessed. No, we have a healthy attitude. We like it, it's fun, it's jolly, because it's a primary impulse. It can be dangerous and dark and difficult. It's a bit like food in that respect, only even more exciting. The only people who are obsessed with food are anorexics and the morbidly obese. And that, in erotic terms, is the Catholic Church in a nutshell.